Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. And before I get started, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode. At the end of the video, we talk about the viewer's pick of the week. But let's get started. It's a pretty big week, but also a small haul. I didn't get a lot of books, but you know, the books we gotta talk about, we're gonna talk about. So number 7 for me is World Tree issue 2, which I'm surprised is so low. I always want to like James Tynion's style of writing. And there's a few books that I do enjoy from him, his run on Batman being one of them, but he is definitely more of a world building type of guy. I really love character driven stories, and with this series there's just so many characters to sink your teeth into that there's not really a lead, which is not the type of stories that I tend to like more. Again, this definitely has to do with more of putting the pieces together, showcasing this world, but it's very much a slow burn and just not my style of a book. But I did give it another shot just because it was such a light week, so I was like, let me see where issue 2 goes. But honestly, I thought this issue was weaker than the first issue, which had a little bit more of point A to point B narrative with the person who died in the end of the episode, or the end of the issue. So that is number 7 for me. Let's move on to number 6. That is Powergirl Special. Again, got this one because honestly, DC didn't really release that many books this week. I like Powergirl as a character. I thought this would be an easy way to jump into the character. I will say I like Powergirl, but there's few runs I've read of her, so I wanted to learn even more about her, and I wanted to see what they would do with Fire and Ice. And this very much continues the Action Comics short stories that I have not been reading, so I was like, okay, I feel a little lost in that regard. And then also it just didn't really feel like it did much to sink your teeth and want to get that actual issue 1 that they are building towards. The Fire and Ice thing, I think, was a little bit more towards geared to hardcore fans. I don't know much about the characters, just besides that they were in Justice League International. But other than that, like, I wanted to utilize this to see, like, okay, who are these characters? And I'm hoping their issue 1 will do that a little bit more. Obviously, I understand that backup stories don't have unlimited amount of time to say, hey, this is who these characters are. But I do hope that the hardcore fans really enjoyed it. And I did like the art style for, honestly, both stories. I thought the art was really, really good. It just, both stories didn't really do it for me as someone who's, you know, more of a casual fan of Power Girl and really don't know much about Fire Ice in general. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 6. And I don't remember if I gave a star rating for World Tree, but that was 1.5 stars. Moving on to number 5, which is X23 Deadly Regenesis. Another book I was thinking of dropping, but I believe it's 4 or 5 issues. So now at this point, I only have 2 issues left, so why not just finish it up? The reason I was on the fence, again, there just wasn't a lot of books that came out this week. So I was like, all right, let me see where X23 is going. And this is not necessarily a bad series. It's just more of the struggles I feel like Marvel has had with some of their female-driven miniseries, where there's just not a lot that happens to actually progress the story. This is very much a lost episode of X23, and things we've just seen of her a lot. I wanted something different and new, and I don't know if that really delivered this, even though I think the story is fine. Like, it's not a bad story. It's just kind of a forgettable story, and even the art style I feel like is pretty forgettable, and which is, I think, a shame for a character like X23. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Punisher issue 12. I am shocked to see this so low. I love Punisher. It was almost a pick of the week every single week that this book came out. And the reason this is lower is because it honestly shifted its narrative and style of storytelling for the last issue, which was so weird. There weren't the flashbacks, which I honestly thought was the best part of Punisher. And Maria was kind of out of focus here. It was very much a Punisher story, which obviously understandable. It's a Punisher book. But that's not what the past, 10 issues have been. It's really been about Maria and her point of view. And we get a bit about Maria, but it's not from her point of view. It almost takes away the strength that Maria had, that she took over her own narrative, because it became back again to Punisher and how he feels about Maria. In the long run, I like where she ended up, and she's like, hey, I don't want to be with you. It's kind of repetitive to the last issue, but we do find out that she's pregnant, so I thought that was very interesting. So Punisher does have kids. Where does this go? And you get to see a new chapter for Punisher. I don't know if Jason Aaron will be taking over the character again, or someone else will pick up the seeds, or really it will be a completely different narrative when we do eventually get another Punisher issue 1, but I just don't feel like this one stuck the landing as much as those previous issues issues did, even though as a whole, I still really love this series, from the arc to the storytelling to what it did for Maria's character in particular. So giving that, I believe I gave that 3 stars maybe, or maybe it was 2.5. It was 3 stars, so that is number 4. And honestly, that was mostly because of the ending. I do think there's some good pages in the end where it's like, oh, cool. That's some interesting beats that we have there. Moving on to the show here. Moving on to why you're probably here, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 26. A little higher than I expected, but again, there just weren't a lot of books this week, so that's also why it's higher, because I really did have a lot of conflicting feelings. Let's talk about the positives and why I did put this a little higher, is because it did finally do something, right? I believe if this wasn't spoiled for us, I might have even been shocked and been like, oh my god, they really been doing the red herring with Mary Jane. I didn't expect it to be Miss Marvel who dies, which is also part of the negatives. And then also there's some interesting tidbits that happen. You know, MJ's kids disappear rather quickly. We get to see Paul's reveal that he's part of this lineage of Rabin. Interesting, but they don't really do much with it. So there's definitely a lot of things that had a lot of potential, which is what I liked about this issue. And honestly, I think this is some of John Romita Jr.'s cleaner art style. Again, John Romita Jr. is not my favorite artist, but I think in his style, this felt better and stronger. So things I thought didn't quite work for this, and we'll get to the Miss Marvel death, but Mary Jane, I think, just being utilized as the red herring. I said this in my previous reviews. I feel like Black Cat and Mary Jane did such a better job of characterizing Mary Jane. I think they tried here, where she does have her strengths. She fights off Rabin. She wants to protect her. Well, she wants to get revenge from her about her kids, and she does use her powers, but there's so many moments where Peter's like, you gotta stand off, and the Miss Marvel's like, I'll protect you, and it's just like, why can't Mary Jane just have her own story and do her own thing? And I was just like, okay, what was the point of that? And then what I stated before, there's a lot of things that are introduced here that just doesn't have a full follow-through. Especially Miss Marvel's death, right? Miss Marvel, as a character in Spider-Man, let's talk about first, has just kind of been stuck in here. I don't really, still to this day, don't understand why Miss Marvel's in this book, and it still feels very random in this issue where she's like, okay, I'm gonna protect Mary Jane because she's my friend. I'm like, when did that really happen? And I think that's a disservice to Spider-Man and Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel has so many wonderful characters that are connected to her, Captain Marvel being one of them, or even just her supporting cast members, where to die like this to save someone she hardly knows, it's supposedly her friend, just felt weird. And I feel like the moment, that heroic moment, just felt tacked on, and if this was just a random character, fine, but I feel like Miss Marvel had such a legacy before this series, and it really is just such a disservice to her character. And then to Spider-Man fans, let's say fans that really don't know much about Miss Marvel, don't care about the character, I don't think it's a service to them either. Why are we sticking this random character just to have, again, this kind of random death with no purpose? And it felt like it was for the shock value. It didn't really feel like it was there for storytelling, and that's kind of this whole issue. My biggest nitpick is just like, let's see what sticks, and everything kind of falls apart. I just feel like nothing really had any build up towards it, which is really why this felt so. I didn't feel any emotion. I love Kamala Khan as a character. I wish I felt emotional about it. There was not one beat that really sticks for Miss Marvel. And honestly, there's not even one word that has to do with her. There's no monologue where she's like, this is my character. This is why Miss Marvel's death is so important. It could have been any character who died that way, and the same words could have been attached to them. And maybe the Miss Marvel thing was a last minute choice, but my point being is I think it was a disservice to almost every character in this issue for the events that happened. But the reason why this is higher is that I think I've been in such a period that nothing has happened in Spider-Man. I kind of like that they had the guts to do something. So that's my conflicting feelings on The Amazing Spider-Man. But let me know in the comments below. I desperately need to hear your thoughts on the Miss Marvel death. So that's number 3 for me. Moving on to number 2, which is Local Man, issue 4. I do think this was one of the weaker issues of the series, but the series has been so phenomenal. That's not saying much in that regard, or it's saying a lot. Because, this issue is good point A to point B. We get a little bit more of the conflict between our Local Man's old team members and What I liked the most is his maybe newfound friendship with this police officer that was his old-time friend, the husband of him. So there's some complicated relationships there, tying into romance and the cheating narrative that he has had throughout the first issue, and what his morals stand for. And yeah, I like this issue. I do think it was a good growth for just learning a little bit more about his history, but I just don't think there was as much progression as some of the previous issues, or as much emotional weight as the previous issues. The art was good. The dog was really cute in this issue. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, which is DC Pride 2023. I really thought this was a solid issue, and I feel like DC does such a beautiful job at putting this anthology together. I really feel like there's so much heart that goes into it, because every story really has a purpose. I feel like there's a really good catalog of characters. Like, it opens up with Grant Morrison having a story. Then, you know, some of your bigger characters, bigger queer characters like Tim Drake or John or Constantine, like, they all have narratives. But honestly, I like the Tim one probably the most. I really enjoyed his conversation with Connor, and also was connected to previous Pride books, which felt nice, because then it feels like, oh cool, I'm reading these on a yearly basis to kind of see a continuous story and see how these characters grow. And then I think the unlikely duo of Crush, Harley, and Ivy was just so much fun. So there's a lot of stories that just hit every mark, and I feel like there's just enough variety for every type of DC fan to really enjoy. So that is why is my pick of the week. Really, really fun book, and this is how you should do your anthologies. This is how you should do your superhero anthologies and your queer anthologies in general. So definitely worth the pickup. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what was your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.